Hi guys, my name's Chris. I live in Australia. Take a walk with me. Just think of this chat as we're just two mates going for a walk down the path, talking about the budget today. And I'm going to try steer clear of all the circus of Canberra, name calling and all that kind of stuff. That if you want to see that, switch on the mainstream media. They'll just be going name calling, blah blah blah. You know, we've already heard about the $5 per week. You know, tax relief, tax cut for it, $5 per week, and you know it's nothing. We've heard that. So the mainstream media, okay, and they're just going to keep talking about that stuff. But today, I want to run through just the high level, guys. So the high level, why I'm concerned about this budget. I'm not going to dig into like super niche little things or anything, because budgets are boring, guys. They're boring, okay? They come out, they're so many pages, they're that thick, man. That thick. I read through it. It sucks. It's so boring. And I don't want to bore you guys. So I'm just going to run through high level why I'm very concerned about the budget and why it's making our lives harder. So if you're watching this, you're in the cost of living crisis with me, okay? Our bills are going up, rent's going up. If you're on a mortgage, that's going up too. You're just getting gutted, okay? Everything's getting more expensive and we're struggling. But, you know, an underlying cause is the money coming into the system. So our government, they have a budget each year, okay? And our government says this is how much money we're going to spend across the year. The problem, though, that's created from our government is that we have debt now because they are overspending money year after year after year. So last year we were at $940 billion in debt. Now, this fiscal year coming through, we'll be over $1 trillion in debt. It'll be $1,020 million. That's what we're going to hit in debt. So we're increasing our debt. And we're increasing our debt because the money that we spent last year, well, we need more money. So we're spending even more money than what we're getting in from our revenue. So that's creating more debt. Our debt is going up as a direct result of that, of overspending from the government currently. So that's an issue because it's not just the next year happening. The 4-year projection till 2029, we're going to go from $940 billion in debt where we are right now, all the way up to $1.22 trillion. So an extra $280 billion in debt being added, or 30% of our current debt being added in just 4 years. And these are all-time high debts for Australia, guys. This is new levels of gross overspending. We've never seen anything like this before. It's getting worse. An extra $280 billion in debt in 4 years. So the year that just happened, we spent $262 billion, okay? That's the money that we spent. That puts an extra $40 billion in debt. So we went over what we're supposed to spend by $40 billion. So extra $40 billion in debt there. Now this budget's come through, and instead of, you know, trying to cut back or anything like that, no, we haven't gone that way. We've increased what we intend to spend. We didn't have enough money last year, but now we're increasing it to $785 billion, which is an extra $22 billion past what we spent last year. So we're increasing the amount that we spend, and our debt is increasing. So we're going over the budget. We're just raising the ceiling of what we're going to spend, and then we're like, can we get it under this time? But no, we're raising and we're going further into debt. This is madness. By not only spending all the money you had last year, but then going $40 billion into debt, and then saying this year, I'm going to spend even more than I'm getting in, and I'm going to even go even further into debt from it. This is your piss drunk mate on the pokies running an entire credit card through, just on the pokies, slaps it through, just $20 spins all the way through. Just slaps it through, maxes out the credit card, and he goes, oh, well, you know, that'll do. He comes back the next week and he's like, well, I've still got all the debt. I'm not paying the interest off on this thing, and I've got a new credit card. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing again, except this credit card's got a higher limit. And then the week after, he comes back with an even higher limit credit card without paying any of the debt off. That's what our government's doing, guys. This is piss drunk money management. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. And you know who ends up getting absolutely slammed and squeezed for that? That's us. The people. The people are getting squeezed by this because the debt's got to be paid at some point. And that debt is being paid by squeezing us with inflation. It is piss drunk money management, mate. Absolutely piss drunk. I'm sick of it. Back 20 years ago, so 2005, the Australian government had about $60 billion in debt, in gross debt. Net debt was actually zero. Net debt $0 20 years ago. Gross debt was $60 billion. Now, 20 years later, gross debt over $1 trillion. Okay, we did it. We did it. $1 trillion in 20 years, guys. $1 trillion in 20 years. We did it. We are piss drunk money managers. Well, our government is. Our government's just piss drunk on the pokies, blowing cash like there's no tomorrow. And then when the tomorrow comes, they just get another credit card and do it all over again. Doing it all over again. That's our money, guys. That's our taxpayer money, and they're just blowing it. So instead of looking at it as an entire country and, you know, trying to manage an entire country's debt, let's just break it down simple with some common sense. Let's just look at it as household debt. So put yourselves in the shoes. You've got a household. You're managing your household. So what you don't do is you don't understand that you have so much money coming through, and then you go and use all that money up and then go further into debt, okay? You don't go getting loans to go further into debt. And then if you already have loans, what you don't do is you don't just ignore them. You got to start paying them back at some point. So you don't spend more than you have, you live within your means, and you manage your debt. You start paying your debt down. You don't keep getting more and more and spending more and more that you don't have. You know, instead of thinking like health and defense and education, all these different sectors, just think of it as your bills, your insurance bill coming in, your energy bill coming in. Okay, so that's where you compare it across to the government. They've got these different bills, different costs. You also have different bills from different things. So think about that. You have so much money coming in. This is what you do, okay? This is what you do when you're in a bit of a pickle, like our government is. If our government was treating this like household, this is what you'd be doing to sort it out. You say, cool, I've got so much money coming in, so what I do is that is the most money I can spend. You cap your spending. You don't spend more than you have coming in, you cap your spending. So cool, this is the limit, this is what I got coming in. But then you start going through your expenses. You start saying, well, what are all these extra expenses I've got? And you trim the fat, you trim the bloat out of it. Okay, in a real person's household, you start looking at like, okay, is there a cheaper phone plan I've got? Why am I paying for 2 subscriptions to streaming services? I'll cut one of them off. You go through, you trim the fat, okay? There's always little expenses here and there, but the government has got a lot more expenses naturally, so there's probably a lot of rot happening in there and a lot of fat that could be trimmed. So you start going through, you cap what you're spending, you start going through and you're like, what expenses are actually crap? And you start cutting out those expenses because you need to start servicing your debt, okay? So that $1 trillion in debt, we've got to start paying that down, guys. That's 27 billion per year in interest that we're paying on that debt. And that's going to continue to increase further and further and further as we go further and further into debt, unless we start turning things around now. So you cut your expenses, you've capped your income, you cut your expenses, then you set a plan in place to start paying down your debt. Now, if you treat it like a household, and you say, cool, well, I've got $1 trillion debt, let's treat it like a home loan and try to pay this thing off in 30 years. So in 30 years, you've got to pay about 35 billion down in principal, plus, you know, you've got your interest, well, 27 billion a year around right now. So let's zoom out from household, go back to the state of the nation right now, the state of Australia. Okay, so this year, okay, this budget, we got $750 billion coming in from revenue. The largest contributor to that is income tax. So 750 billion coming in. Now our budget to spend is 785 billion. So the first thing we do is we go, well, we've got to stay within our means, don't we? So we've got to cut $35 billion in extra funding out of it. Cut $35 billion out to get it down to 750, because that's the most that we have coming in. We're in a pickle, okay? Because we've got debt, we've got $1 trillion of debt now. So if we understand that we have $27 billion in interest coming through on that debt across the year, we need to cut or find an extra $27 billion. And that's for the interest. Now, treating it like, say, a home loan, we've got to start paying down the principal as well. Otherwise, we'll just be paying interest for nothing, never getting ahead, and always paying it perpetually until the end of time. So you've got to start paying the principal down. Now, if we attempted to cut the $1 trillion debt, it's a crazy number, $1 trillion in debt, if we attempted to cut that one down over 30 years, we'd need to do about 35 billion a year. So between the interest and the principal, we probably need to start cutting about 62 billion. So that means we've got 750 coming in, and then on the country, we can only spend $688 billion because the other 62 billion has to go to servicing our loans. So we've got to cut down quite a bit here, guys. We've got to cut down from 785 to 688. So what's that, 97 billion dollars we need to cut or find. So I say cut or find for a reason, because we have $97 billion that we need to cut out from that 785 billion. Otherwise, we're going backwards. So if we don't cut it, we go backwards. And that's what the budget's saying. It's saying we're going to go backwards for the next 4 years, even further and further and further into debt. So that 97, we've got to cut or find. So cutting naturally is, going through and finding programs and stuff that we're paying for that we don't need to. But finding it, that's, two things there. Two things. That's where we find extra things to tax, extra revenue coming in. As an idea, LPG. Only 56% of the LPG in this country is paying royalties. Now, LPG, that's just an example on this stuff here. That's 56% is not paying any royalties across what we're extracting. If you go across all the resource sector, sure, there's plenty of other areas that aren't paying full royalties or paying the royalties they should be. Additionally, that's more, billions more coming in that we can use towards that. That's finding the money. Alternatively, 2022 to 2023, over 1,200 companies of our largest multinationals and big corporations, big companies running in Australia, over 1,200 paid $0 in tax, using tax loopholes and offset rules. So we've got some gaps in our tax system, where 1,200 of some of the largest multinationals and corporations and companies and the big boys essentially have paid $0 in tax. 31% of them, $0 in tax. So tax reform is probably required around there to find out, hey, how can we close these loopholes so they pay tax? Because between the royalties and between taxing large corporations correctly, well, even though they're using loopholes right now, closing the loopholes and then taxing them so money actually goes to the country instead of just being used in little offsets and moved around and shifted little numbers on the screen and says, oh, technically we've justified it by this. Paying tax in the country while you're exploiting and plundering not just the resources here, but the people living here too. So they've got to pay their fair share. But if you do that, suddenly, over $100 billion straight up from that coming in per year. And that's your gap. That's your gap, $100 billion just from them two things. There's plenty of other things you could do as well around taxation, plenty of other things, but currently, income tax, that's the largest contributor in. That's from the people in this country paying for what we're working towards, while corporations are getting away scot-free with it. Getting away scot-free. They're just rorting the system, paying as little as they can. They get tax benefits that me and you, people living in this country, that work in this country, and our income tax do not get. The other way is going through and cutting expenses. So I said $285 billion is currently in the budget. If we start going through the programs and sectors the government's paying now, I think we can find a little bit of leeway with it all. I think we can find some programs that we probably don't need to be paying. I think we'll find a little bit of rot in it. When you look at the overall, budget of the $785 billion, you see things in there, like sectors in there like health, like education, like defense, public services. You see that kind of stuff in there. You're like, okay, well, that makes sense. That makes sense to see. But then there's these other large sections, and it's $233 billion. So almost a third of it, 30%, roughly 30%, $233 billion being spent, just labelled other purposes and other functions. What are they? It's $233 billion. And that's not to say that there's things in there that, aren't critical or aren't vital, but if they don't fit into a category that makes sense, like health or defence or education, those got to be put across in a almost miscellaneous government expenditure. Do you think there's going to be some stuff in there that is not needed? Do you think there's going to be some rot in there? And that's not to say that health and defence and education doesn't have rot going on right now. There's rot happening, guys, okay? The system's being plundered, okay? People are ripping off the money from the government. They're getting their government contracts through, they're charging the government through the absolute wazoo. So there's rot, there's exploit happening with it. But all I'm saying, we just need to find $100 billion of that rot and exploit, or mix of both, finding that extra tax revenue coming through from our royalties and taxing corporations, and cutting back on the fat a little bit from what our government's currently doing. So I think we need some more transparency around this. We need clearer transparency, because you can't just put stuff into miscellaneous. You can't do that, okay? It's not fair. Because the current solution, the current direction that the government's heading in right now is to increase spending each year, not pay the debt down. Okay, get us further and further and further into debt. We'll be an extra $280 billion in debt in the next 4 years. So 1.22 trillion. We're just about to hit 1 trillion, highest ever in our nation's history. We're cooking it, okay? We're absolutely cooking the country right now. Let's throw another Aussie on the Barbie at this point, okay? And we're fed up with it. Because if this stuff is allowed to continue, okay? If governments can just keep spending more and more and more, I guess to put it in perspective, when there's more debt to be paid down and they're printing money into the economy, it starts to devalue what the dollar's worth. It starts to create inflation. And while the governments can balance it on books, and it's just a number exercise, moving things around, and they say we get more money to pay off the previous money, get more money to pay off the previous money, and everything's inflating as a result. And they say, well, you know, the money or the debt's not worth as much anymore. If you start looking at a modern monetary theory, which they're applying here, the debt's not worth as much, so we can get a loan to pay off that debt, and it's kind of balancing out. Who suffers there? The government's not suffering because they're just playing numbers games on books. But when prices go up, things start to inflate, the dollar becomes worth less and less from their actions. When that's happening, it's the people, the flesh and blood Australians in this country, we're the ones who are paying the price. Our food gets more expensive, we get less food. Our houses get more expensive, we can't afford housing. Our bills go up, our energy goes up. People are choosing between heat, choosing between meals because of the electricity bills or the food bills, or the rent. It goes up. We're being absolutely strained here. We're being strangled. We're being strangled. And it's just getting worse and worse. The government is going down the path of more debt, spend more money, and the people of the country can struggle. And it will get harder and harder. Because if we don't change the way these budgets are done, if we don't start to address the debt and get things under control, at least stop spending more and more each year, what happens is your kids, your grandkids, they don't have a snowball's chance in hell, mate. Their life will be exponentially harder. You think it's hard right now? Give it another 20 years. Give it another 30 years. That's kicking the can down the road for the next generation to suffer. Now, biologically, as humans, government, that's a fucking construct. It's not a human, okay? But humans, we are biologically wired to protect our young, to protect each other, to protect the next generation coming through. We are biologically wired to do that. We are not biologically wired to make our children suffer, to make our grandchildren suffer. We're not wired to do that. So why are we letting the government do that? All this debt, all this expenditure is going to make them suffer. It is 100% guarantee. We have, as Australians, and as a man in Australia, thought crosses all of our minds at one point on legacy. What do we leave behind? And generally, you want to leave something behind. What the very vast majority of people want to do is they want to leave this place behind in a better state than they got it. Okay, so we want to leave the world behind better than we received it. And currently, we are on the path to make sure that your kids, your grandkids, are going to absolutely suffer. They're going to suffer, mate, because the government is blowing the money. The money's gone, they're going to be paying back even more than you had to pay back. It's the end game. So guys, what are your thoughts? Leave them down below in the comments. The comment section's yours. Leave your thoughts. Is the government going the wrong direction? Are we absolutely blowing our money? Are your kids, grandkids going to suffer? What needs to be done here? I've thrown some ideas at it. I think we need to cut back. But what are your thoughts? Comment sections are yours. I'll see you in the next one.